Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Rei-Lin, and I'm bringing you some Tom Clancy's The Division today. Just kind of wanted to do a mini review on this game because I know that the game has been out now for a little bit, and there's been a lot of other people that have done reviews and given their opinions on the game, some good, some bad. And I just wanted to throw my opinion out there on YouTube as well. I mean, I figured I might as well. And let's just talk about it. I mean, basically, you're going to see me wandering around here doing nothing necessarily in particular, but I wanted to start with like the graphics. I know a lot of people have focused on the graphics and this Division trailer that was released at E3, and it showed all these spectacular graphics, all this stuff, and all of these things that the game engine was going to do, like, you know, if you threw a grenade or set a fire on the ground, the snow would melt, and then when it snowed, it would cover back up and melt and make puddles. And, you know, I mean, you can look right here. I mean, honestly, I can't even do it justice because I can't show this thing in the maximum resolution that I would like to. So, but even at that, there are videos out there, I'm sure, that are running this thing at 4K resolution. It looks great. I mean, I haven't had any major issues. I know some people have, and they've talked about it, you know, en masse about, oh, there's all these lights that go weird on me and these textures that go weird on me. But you know, like any developer, you can't expect massive to go out and fix everything for every video card and every setup on PC, especially. This game is out on the Xbox One and PS4, and you would expect, obviously, that the console versions don't look as good as the PC version will be able to look, depending on your setup. And in a lot of ways, looking at both, that is the case. I mean, if you're on PC and you're running this thing on maximum settings, which is pretty much what I'm running mine at, the game looks amazing. From the light effects to these fog effects like this, you know, here it is, it's snowing, and you get all these volumetric effects like this. I mean, that just looks almost like photorealistic to me. And so graphically, if you're coming in here because you just want a pretty game to look at, I really think this is a pretty game to look at. Now, obviously that depends on if you like pretty New York City. You know, do you want to see a bunch of buildings, or are you more along the lines of wanting Skyrim or Fallout type of games, which might have, you know, a lot of trees and grass and, you know, textures of rocks, and you're fighting dragons and stuff. Well, I mean, this is more a down-to-earth, more realistic kind of shooter along the lines of, you know, all the other Tom Clancy games. And so I think a lot of people came to this game wanting the same graphics that they saw in the trailer at E3 a few years ago, and I think they pulled off 95% of all of the graphical power that they showed there. Even without a few of the things that they supposedly promised at E3, the game still looks great, and I don't see anybody, especially on PC, that needs to be complaining about the graphic quality of this game. Everything looks good, and there are thousands of little details, just from stuff blowing around in the wind to the fact that you can shoot out the tires in the cars, and the brakes on the cars actually fall at a different rate than the tire because now it's flat, and you can shoot the glass out of almost any building, at least on the street level, out of the cars. Windshields, now some of the windshields don't cave in and chunk like the side glass does, and neither does some of the rear glass. As you can see, there's bullet holes right there in that car right there in front of me, and it looks real. I mean, to me, a lot of this game looks true to real life. And I guess online a few people have started comparing this game using maps and GPS coordinates, and they've found the same streets in New York, and in some of these streets, I guess they are modeled right down to where the cars are parked. So the attention to detail in this game it just shouldn't be laughed off. It should not be something that people are complaining about. It should be like, man, yeah, there's a couple things that weren't included from the trailer at E3 a few years ago. I don't care. The game still looks great. And that's all I have to say about the graphics. The gameplay, as you can see, it is an RPG. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's a massive multiplayer online RPG, because as you can see, I'm running around in my own version of New York City. I'm by myself right now, soloing, and I don't see other players. No one else is out there fighting you for loot or fighting you for mobs or anything, chests, you know, treasure chests, nothing. You're by yourself. About the only time you ever see anybody else is if you're in the dark zone or you're at a hub, like a safe house or something like that. Then you'll see other players. Now, you can team up. The dungeons can have 4 players, and that's when you'll see a lot of people. There's a matchmaking system for the dungeons, and so all of that stuff just kind of transitions really smooth. But as far as always seeing tons of people running around in a map and, vying for position to talk to a certain NPC because there's 1,000 people and you can't see them, that doesn't happen in the Division, so don't worry about that. The gameplay, it is an RPG with guns. I mean, you've got a cover system, and the cover mechanic, I think it works really well. My only real gripe with the cover mechanic is that sometimes it feels a little sticky. Like, there are very clutch moments in this game where you take a shot or you're on fire and you need to move. And sometimes the cover system is so interested in keeping you covered that it really doesn't want you to get out of cover, and that can get you killed. I've died on more than one occasion trying to get away from my cover, and it just sticks me to that wall a little bit longer than I wanted it to, and then I end up getting killed. But it's one of the things it's a gameplay issue. You have to understand that you got to get used to how this plays. I think a lot of people are coming to the Division thinking this is going to be just like every other Tom Clancy shooter. It's going to be this very, very tactful shooter where, one hit and you're dead and all this stuff. But that's not how it is. It's like any other RPG. You're taking a lot of hits. You're healing the damage. You're attacking enemies. They're taking a lot of damage. They can take 15 headshots and they're not dead. All of that. So it's RPG, and the enemies are like bullet sponges. They do take a lot of time to kill, but these enemies, for example, right now I'm in the dark zone with my friend Weekend Zombie, and we're killing elites. Almost everything in the dark zone is an elite enemy. He's got several bars of life with some armor on top of that, so you have to chew through what is essentially like 2 or 3 life bars worth of health. And it makes it more challenging. I mean, that's the whole point, is I want a challenge. I don't want to go in and just completely destroy everything with one hit to the head or one shot to the knee blowing their legs off. I mean, that would be cool, don't get me wrong. There are sniper rifles in the game. In fact, I'm using one right now, shooting that guy to death with my M1A, which is an excellent marksman rifle. They don't call them sniper rifles in the Division. And here we're extracting our loot. This is something I'll talk about very shortly, and that's the Dark Zone. But gameplay-wise, don't come in to the Division thinking that this is going to be a shooter first and RPG second. It's an RPG with shooter elements. So it's a little bit of a different way of thinking about how to play the Division. It's an RPG first. It's got cover mechanics. It's got some sniping. It's got all kinds of weapon types and enemies that take tons of hits. So don't expect to come in here and your guys are going to be knocking over the Pentagon with just you and 3 other people and having to move in tiny, tiny increments. And, one guy's got to be on the pistol, one guy's got to be on the radar screen or something. It's not that kind of a game. It's a lot easier to get into than that. And I think the play style of the game is new. It's kind of unique. It's refreshing, at least for me, coming from traditional MMO gameplay where you're just going out with your character and slaughtering, 15 boars and then coming back and turning the quest in and all of that. There's no picking up of quests in the sense that you got a quest log and stuff that tracks everything. There's none of that. So the way the game is set up, I think it works really, really well. The solo aspect does get boring. So if you don't have at least a couple of friends that you can play with every now and then, you're probably going to get bored. I mean, I didn't get bored really with the game. I'm still playing the crap out of this thing as much as I can because it's really, really fun. No fight is ever the same, even when you're in the same area. Enemies use different tactics based on what kind of weapons and tactics you're using, so the game kind of stays constantly in motion. There's not really a lot of static ideas going on here for the enemies. I mean, they're moving around because I'm moving around, and it just makes the game really fun for me, even when I'm soloing. There's a lot of things you can do by yourself, except for maybe the challenge modes of the dungeons. But you can even solo the dungeons. You can solo the hard mode dungeons. Not so much the challenge mode dungeons, because the challenge mode is where you start to get into the feeling that every person in the team needs to kind of have a different role. So the tank, the healer, the DPS, because some of the tactics the enemies use basically need you to have a specific role. You need a healer. You're going to take so much damage. Almost any enemy in a challenge mode dungeon, if you're not a tank, they're going to one-shot you. And so when you move into that kind of difficulty in the dungeons, it becomes more like you're using a lot of tactics to get through those dungeons and not get killed. So when it comes to that side of things, you keep that in mind, and it is really fun. But it's much more fun with friends. You see, my friend, he ended up dying in the Dark Zone. If you die, you can't resurrect, so I couldn't bring him back up from the dead. In PvE content, you can, but the Dark Zone, it works different. But all in all, if you have a couple of friends, the game gets infinitely more fun. The enemies get a little bit harder, and you can use different tactics. Otherwise, it's just you staying back with a sniper rifle in general, trying to stay as far away from the action as you can, and take stuff down. And over time, running the same dungeons over and over and over by yourself does get a little annoying. It gets a little boring. But how boring it gets is obviously up to each individual person to decide. I would play it with friends more than I would want to play it solo. But anyway, let's go to the one thing that I had a lot of trouble with, and a lot of other people have a lot of trouble with, and that is what you're seeing right now. It's the Dark Zone. The Dark Zone is basically a giant area of the map that is sealed off from the PvE content. And there's a reason for that, and that is that you can be killed at any time if somebody decides to go rogue. Now, storyline-wise, going rogue and being rogue is a really, really, really bad thing. I don't really want to give away too much about that because there are story aspects that deal with the rogues. But you can kill anybody, unless they're in your team, that just happens to wander by. Like you see, I'm following a player right now, and if I wanted to, I could go up behind him and just start laying into him and kill him. And he will drop any items he's carrying, and I will go rogue. The problem I have with the Dark Zone, and it's not so bad right now, but it does vary based on the week and the time of day you play, is that the Dark Zone is a PvP zone with PvE elements that are very, very important, because the best gear in the game right now does not drop from a named boss or a world boss or any kind of boss. You go to the Dark Zone, and the Dark Zone has its own credit system and leveling system. You can see at the top right of my screen, I am Dark Zone level 28 and PvE level 30. At Dark Zone level 30, I can buy some patterns at some of the safe houses that are in the Dark Zone. And the best patterns are at level 50. They require Dark Zone level 50. Now, you can take those patterns and you basically make the best gear in the game. And you go back to your base and you use those patterns to create weapons and armor and mods, pretty much everything you need to deck yourself out in some of the best gear that you can get. Now, there's a huge amount of randomness to that, because every time you craft something using the crafting system here, it is, and does, I should say, carry with it complete RNG as to the damage range the gun will have, and the talents that the gun will have. Some of those gun types require very specific talents to be of really any good use to you. You don't want an SMG that comes with a talent that increases headshot damage, as you know, or something like that. That's not good for an SMG, but would be good for a marksman rifle. But basically, what you end up with is a system that is so RNG that unless you get extremely, extremely lucky when you're crafting, you're probably not going to craft your god gun on the first try. So you're going to need materials. That means you're going to have to keep going back into the Dark Zone to get division tech. You can only get it in the Dark Zone. It's in chests. Other people can loot the stuff. And so the likelihood is you're going to be in the Dark Zone for a long time grinding this stuff out. I wouldn't care so much about that part, but because it is a PvP zone, you can be killed at any time if you're just in there, even just to get your Dark Zone rank to 50, so you can buy the patterns and you can go back to your base and be safe and sound, away from any kind of horrible things that might want to kill you, make all your epic and high-end gear, and just enjoy the game and not worry about the PvP. So again, they're trying to marry PvE and PvP together. Now, while it does not necessarily happen all the time that somebody is ganking you in the Dark Zone, the fact is there are 6 zones of the Dark Zone, from 1 to 6. And people generally in Dark Zone 5 and 6 have a lot of really great gear. And there's nothing that stops them from coming all the way down to Dark Zone 1 and just raffle stomping over people that just don't have any gear yet. And the difference is dramatic, you know, as far as how much damage they can do, or how much health they have, or how much healing they can do. There are plenty of other videos out there on YouTube that showcase people just completely destroying people. And there's a couple of videos out there of one person, just one person taking on a team of 8 or 9 other players and winning, just based on how good he is plus his gear. And in the majority of cases, it's the gear that's really carrying him. He's a good player, and there are good players. I'm not going to take anything away from the real PvPers that are really good at the game. But a lot of this is based on how good your gear is. There's a lot of MMOs out there that base a lot of the skill on how good your gear is, and the better your gear, you know, the worse the player can be, and the gear will carry them. So I'm hoping that at some point they're going to add some way to kind of separate it out a little bit, whether they add some specific gear that's just really good for the Dark Zone and very bad for PvE content like the challenge mode dungeons and whatnot, so that there's a reason to come in here, and once you get geared up for Dark Zone, well, you'll stand a chance, and then, you know, at least it gives you a goal to kind of work towards. I'm hoping maybe they'll even add battlegrounds, where the PvP is completely separated from the PvE. You'll go into the battlegrounds, there'll be a lot more balance, because right now you see I'm just using my gear, they're using their gear, the guys next to me. I don't know who these players are, but if they wanted to, they could kill me right now and take my stuff and go rogue, and all they have to do is survive. But the whole rogue idea doesn't really work either, because if they go rogue, everybody on the map's going to know where they are. You see a red skull on your map. Wherever a rogue goes, you'll see where they're at. And if they die as a rogue, they suffer immense penalties. They lose experience, which means you lose levels. And if you're losing Dark Zone levels, that means you're losing the ability to buy the gear patterns that you need to craft the high-end gear, which is pretty much the goal of the game right now. You lose Dark Zone credits and Dark Zone keys for the chests that are all spread throughout the Dark Zone that generally has okay loot, and since the last patch, it's supposed to drop even better loot. So there's really no incentive. They don't really want you to go rogue based on the storyline and based on the harsh penalties you get for going rogue and dying if you're a rogue. And since everyone on the map knows where you are, it can quickly degenerate into just a gank fest left and right. And it, to me, while it's interesting, eventually that's going to get old. And if you're too good and you're going rogue on purpose, and 5-10 people come at you and you mow them all down, the likelihood is they're not going to come back, they're not going to keep engaging you, and they're not going to care anymore. And it's just going to scare away a lot of the PvE players that are really, in general, going into the Dark Zone because they want the PvE gear. I would be surprised to see any PvEers going into the Dark Zone if there was nothing in there for them to get or to do. Just as a pure PvP game, that's, I think, the Division's biggest weakness. And I hate to dwell on the Dark Zone, but that is, to me, the biggest weakness of the game. To me, it should have been a giant free-for-all boss zone for PvEers to go in there and gear up to do the challenge modes in the normal PvE zones, and give the PvPers the battlegrounds like in pretty much every other MMO that's out there on the market, where it's either 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, 5v5, 12-on-12 battles, whatever they want to do. And they can just go in there and completely destroy everybody with no penalties, and with the understanding that it is a PvP battleground, you're going to be in there with other people that are like-minded PvPers. When you start trying to pull the two PvE and PvP things together and mesh them into like this kind of oozy soup between the two, it just generally doesn't work. The PvEers don't want a PvP, and the PvPers don't want the PvEers PvPing, because it ruins their games. I mean, we just saw an example of that, for example, with Armored Warfare. They just are, I think, just finished up running a special where if you won so many battles over the course of a month, you would get like a lot of gold and a free tank. And immediately there was a shitstorm on the forums about it because, the PvEers didn't want a PvP. And the PvPers didn't want them in there, PvP, and either because they knew that a lot of people that hate the PvP side of things are just going to AFK in the battles. So that their battles are going to be worse, the games aren't going to be as fun, and it's just going to be an AFK fest. So they didn't understand, why, Obsidian decided to do it that way. And maybe, I know they wanted to try to, garner some interest in the PvP, but I think just fixing their game at the higher tiers would do that. But either way, that's just one example of why the two don't always mesh, and I've never really seen a game where that meshes the two aspects between PvE and PvP to where everybody's happy. And of course, not everyone's ever going to be happy no matter what they do. But right now, I think the Dark Zone needs something else, and we've seen they've posted and done podcasts and Twitch streams where they're talking about the future with their DLC coming out, where they're going to have like drop zones in the Dark Zone, which are basically just free for all. The first person that gets there gets some awesome loot. You don't have to extract it, which is also nice because that means even if you get there, no one can kill you and take the loot from you that you just worked hard enough to get in there and get. So there are some ideas kicking around, and obviously there's going to be a lot more DLC. There's going to be a lot more coming out, because that was also another gripe that I saw out on the internet. It's just that the game is, everyone's rushed to the end of the game, and now they're kind of bored because there wasn't enough content. And I have to say flat out that people need to understand that there's not going to be content like, say, World of Warcraft, and everyone compares almost every MMO or an RPG game, even The Division, to World of Warcraft because it is kind of the gorilla in the room. And that is pretty much how it goes. I mean, World of Warcraft has been out now since 2004. They have content out the yin-yang, and so there's tons and tons and tons of stuff that you can do. Very few developers out there right now have the money and the budget and the time to put out a game right out of the gate with that kind of content. And I know a lot of people probably have no expectation that that is how the Division was supposed to go. But I know that there were areas that they were showing in the trailer, and people were upset because the whole game wasn't there. Why didn't you put out the game with what was in the trailer? And they're just like, guys, that's coming. We've got to have DLC to keep people coming back to the Division. We can't just throw out the entire game out on the market right off the bat, and then we have no content left to put out. That wouldn't make any sense. So I think people like to jump on the bandwagon, and especially people that rush through. I mean, I know there are people that started at level 1, and within 20 hours, they were at max level and already like Dark Zone rank 30 and had a lot of high-end gear and stuff like that. So, I mean, if you're that kind of person, if you're the kind of person that can rush through a game and 10 to 20 hours and get to the end game just because you want to see the ending, I don't think any game's going to come out with the kind of content you're looking for. You're just going to rush through to the end and ignore most of the good parts of the game. Another gripe was that people didn't like the story. They thought it was real basic. They didn't think the characters were that interesting or memorable. And the way I look at it is like you have to kind of step back a second and look at the game a slightly different way, especially when it comes to the story. If you rush through the game and the only story that you get is from the main missions, which push you from zone to zone to zone to zone, and you don't do any of the side quests, you don't do any of the side missions, you don't pick up any of the collectibles, the cell phones, the incident reports, if you don't do any of that, you just focus on the main missions, you're not going to know crap about the story. It gives you a little bit of background on some of the characters that you're fighting in these dungeons and in the missions, but not everything is made as clear as it will be if you go back and do all of the side stuff. There are a lot of MMOs out there that have a quest that kind of pushes you through this storyline, and then the other quests on the side are literally that. They're side quests that don't add to your story, they don't add to the main story, they're just there to get you an extra weapon or some extra money or experience to help you level. The Division isn't necessarily like that. All of these side quests and all of these collectibles, like I mentioned, the incident reports, especially the echoes and the cell phone talking, you start to hear people that are in those missions. You start learning about Joe Farrow, one of the bosses, the main boss of the cleaners, and why he's doing what he's doing, and why he's worried, and how much he hates himself for doing what he's doing. And Aaron Keener is one of the main protagonists in the whole game, and you find out why he is the way he is and why he's thinking the way he is. All of these things are not necessarily told to you until you go out and do all of the side missions and the side quests and do all of the collectibles. And that's kind of a nice way for, I think, the Division to sort of push you in. I mean, you've come in after this major disaster, literally after all the cool stuff, quote unquote cool stuff, has happened, and now you're playing catch up. And it's not until you get right up to the end where you find out that maybe there's a lot more catching up you need to do. It's a storyline thing, I don't want to spoil it, but there are some interesting little tidbits, if you're paying attention, that really make it seem like this has gone on a lot longer than you're first led on to believe. So that's not things you're necessarily going to pick up just by playing straight through, burning through, getting your levels, and going in the dark zone, getting that stuff, and making your weapons, and then having nothing to do at the end of the day. So all of that stuff is very useful, and I really like how they did that. It's a shame to me that that people don't give credit to a pretty good storyline when it comes to the Division, because they don't give it to you just spilled out all over the place. Every time you do a main mission, you find out about 20 other people you didn't know about before, and they're very important and blah, blah, blah. They are very important, and you do learn a lot about them, but not just necessarily from the storyline missions that just push you from zone to zone to zone. There's a lot more to it than that. And I'd say that is probably where I'm going to stop this video. It's already starting to get kind of long. These are my opinions, my review, my thoughts on the game now that I've had some time to play with it and get into the meat and potatoes of the game, see what it is that I liked about it, what I didn't like about it. There are little nitpicky things. You could nitpick this game apart, from small glitches to exploits that people have found about killing bosses repeatedly, or sneaking through fences using certain skills. But all of that is going to be fixed. I mean, I've seen Massive have done a great job on a game, and every time something comes up that causes a problem in the game, within a day or two, they're patching it, they're fixing it, they're getting rid of exploits and cheaters, and honestly, I think they're doing a great job. And if people just keep giving it a chance, month after month, something new is going to come out, and it's going to be really cool. We're going to be pushing into parts of the map that we know are already there. People have already gone outside the boundaries and found Central Park and all these other areas, and it sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun, and it's just going to keep getting better and improving. Really, the only thing that I wasn't that thrilled about was having to go into a PvP zone as a PvEer. I'm old, I'm crap. I don't want to be dealing with people that can spend a lot more time on the game than me getting gear, just getting raffle stomped. But in general, that hasn't happened to me yet. But I always go into the dark zone with a group. Hopefully you guys will do the same thing. You'll have a group of people, a group of friends, and you can play together. And I think that's really where the Division shines. As a solo game, it's good. It's like a Fallout 4. It's like a Skyrim. It's not quite as massive yet as those games, of course, but it gives that same kind of feeling of loneliness. And if you're into that, that's great. If you're not, you may get bored of the game pretty quick once you hit level 30. Otherwise, I think the game is good. I would get it and enjoy it for what it is, with the intent that later on the game is going to come out with even more content and just be a really, really good amount of fun. Anyway, that's going to be it for this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this review gave you a little bit of insight, give you my opinion on it, and if you agree with it, that's fine. If you disagree with it, leave some comments. Tell me what you guys think. Do you really like the game? What would you improve? What do you think needs improving? Are you looking forward to the new content? They got the drop zone stuff coming in the dark zone. They got some improvements on quests. They got incursions coming soon. It's like a bigger raid, even more challenging than the challenge modes themselves, but still only using your 4 people. So it's kind of like a raid with only 4 people. So, there's some challenge there with all new items and item sets. So is that something you guys are looking forward to? Let me know in the comments. And if you did like the video, please press the like button down below. It really does help my channel out. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe, just click here on the screen, and that'll take you to my subscription channel, and that'll get you hooked up every time I upload a video, no matter what it's on, whether it's Armored Warfare or The Division. You'll be the first to know, and you can come check out the new content. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video, guys. Take care, and I'll talk to you all later.